My name is Nicole Sullivan, and I'm 34 years old. 2 days after my father's funeral in Phoenix, I tested my brother's loyalty with a single lie. What I overheard him say on that phone call would expose a conspiracy 15 years in the making and destroy everything I thought I knew about my family. But let me back up to where it all started to fall apart. The funeral was held at Desert View Memorial on a Tuesday afternoon in October. The Arizona heat was relentless even at 4 p.m., and 200 people packed into that chapel to pay their respects to Robert Sullivan, founder of Sullivan Construction. My father, the man who built a $3 million company from absolutely nothing. I stood at the front of the chapel in a black dress I'd bought that morning, my hand clasped to my brother Ryan's. He was 2 years older than me, 36, with our father's strong jawline and our mother's dark eyes. For 20 years, we'd been inseparable, partners in every sense of the word. Dad always called us his dream team. I handled the financial side, the books, the numbers, the strategy that kept us profitable through recessions and building slumps. Ryan managed operations, the crews, the job sites, the client relationships that brought in those major contracts. Together, we'd taken Dad's struggling construction company and turned it into something remarkable, at least. That's what I believed. The first crack appeared during the reception at our father's house in Scottsdale. Our family lawyer, Mitchell Brennan, approached Ryan and me as we stood near the dessert table that nobody was touching. Dad had died of a massive heart attack just 5 days earlier. He was 62 years old, seemingly healthy, and then suddenly gone while reviewing blueprints in his home office. I need to schedule the will reading, Mitchell said, quietly adjusting his glasses. Perhaps Thursday morning at my office? 10 a.m. I nodded, grief still sitting heavy in my chest. That works for us. But when I glanced at Ryan, something stopped me cold. His entire body had gone rigid. His jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. And his eyes, his eyes had changed from warm brown to something completely different. Something cold, calculating, like he was doing complex math in his head and didn't like the numbers he was getting. Ryan? I touched his arm. You okay? He blinked. And just like that, the warmth flooded back. Yeah, sorry. Just thinking about Dad. He smiled at Mitchell. Thursday at 10. We'll be there. Mitchell walked away, and Ryan immediately excused himself to take a phone call outside. I watched him through the window, pacing back and forth on the back patio, one hand gesturing as he spoke to whoever was on the other end of that call. Something felt wrong. Deeply, fundamentally wrong. Before I continue with what happened next, I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. Drop your location in the comments below. And if you're interested in stories about family betrayal, hidden conspiracies, and the moment everything you thought you knew turns out to be a lie, please hit that like button and subscribe to Revenge with Alice. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for what I discovered in my brother's phone call. Let me tell you about the life we built together so you understand exactly what was at stake. Our mother, Catherine Sullivan, died 20 years ago from ovarian cancer. She was only 48. I was 14, Ryan was 16, and Dad was completely destroyed. Mom had been the heart of our family, the one who held everything together while Dad worked 18-hour days trying to get his construction business off the ground. After she died, everything changed. Dad threw himself into work with a desperate intensity, and Ryan and I, we clung to each other and to that business like it was the only solid thing left in our lives. It became our way of staying connected to Dad, of feeling like we still had a family, of honoring Mom's memory by building something she would have been proud of. I started working for Sullivan Construction officially when I was 17, doing basic bookkeeping after school. I had a natural gift for numbers, for seeing patterns in financial data that other people missed. By the time I was 22, fresh out of Arizona State with a degree in finance, I was the company's CFO. Not because Dad gave me a pity position, but because I'd saved us from bankruptcy twice and increased our profit margins by 40%. Ryan took a different path. He started on the crews when he was 16, learning every aspect of construction from the ground up. Framing, electrical, plumbing, concrete work. By 25, he was running entire job sites. By 30, he was our director of operations, the guy everyone wanted to work for because he understood the job from a worker's perspective and knew how to motivate a team. We were magic together. I'd crunch the numbers and find the profitable projects. Ryan would deliver them on time and under budget while keeping client satisfaction through the roof. Dad would close the deals, using his decades of reputation and Ryan's charisma to land contracts that other companies could only dream about. Sullivan Construction grew from a struggling outfit with 5 employees to a regional powerhouse with 80 full-time workers and contracts across Arizona, Nevada, and Southern California. We specialized in commercial construction, mid-sized office buildings, retail centers, medical facilities. Our revenue last year was $8.7 million. The company itself was worth $3.2 million in assets, equipment, and real estate. And through it all, Ryan and I were a team. We finished each other's sentences in meetings. We covered for each other during personal crises. When his marriage fell apart 3 years ago, I helped him through the divorce. When I was hospitalized with appendicitis, he ran both sides of the business for 2 weeks without breaking a sweat. We had Sunday dinners together every week. We remembered each other's birthdays. We argued, sometimes, sure, usually about business strategy or whether to take on certain projects. But we always worked it out, always came back to center, always had each other's backs, or so I thought. Dad's death was supposed to bring us even closer. We were supposed to run Sullivan Construction together, equal partners, continuing his legacy and taking the company to even greater heights. That's what Dad always talked about. You two are going to do amazing things after I'm gone, he'd say, usually after a few drinks at Christmas or Thanksgiving. Sullivan and Sullivan has a nice ring to it. But that look on Ryan's face when Mitchell mentioned the will reading, that wasn't grief. That wasn't sadness about reading Dad's final wishes. That was fear and greed. And something else I couldn't quite identify, but that made my stomach turn. I spent the rest of that reception watching my brother. Really watching him, the way you watch a stranger you're trying to figure out. He took 3 more phone calls outside. Each time, he'd glance around before answering, making sure no one was close enough to hear. Each time his body language screamed tension and secrecy. When the last guests finally left around 8 p.m., Ryan hugged me goodbye in the driveway. "Love you, sis," he said, same as he always did. "We'll get through this together." I hugged him back, but something had shifted. Some fundamental trust had developed a hairline crack. That night, alone in my condo in downtown Phoenix, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying that moment when Mitchell mentioned the will. Kept seeing Ryan's face change. Kept hearing Dad's voice in my head from 6 months ago when he'd seemed unusually serious over one of our Sunday dinners. "Nicole, honey," he'd said, pouring himself a second glass of scotch. "If anything ever happens to me, I need you to remember something. Watch the numbers. Always watch the numbers. They tell the truth when people won't at the time." I'd laughed it off as Dad being dramatic. Now, those words felt like a warning I'd been too blind to see. I made a decision. A test. Not because I wanted to catch my brother in anything, but because I desperately needed him to prove me wrong. I needed him to pass. I needed to know that the brother I loved, the partner I trusted with everything, was still the person I thought he was. 2 days later, I'd set the trap that would change everything. Let me take you back to the beginning, to when Ryan and I were actually the team everyone believed we were. Mom died in March of 2005. I was 14, Ryan was 16, and our world ended on a Tuesday afternoon when the hospice nurse came out of her bedroom and said, "She's gone." Ovarian cancer had ravaged her for 18 months. We'd watched her shrink from the vibrant woman who made our house feel like home into someone we barely recognized. Dad spent every penny we had on treatments, experimental drugs, anything that might buy her more time. Nothing worked. After the funeral, Dad disappeared into his work. He'd leave the house at 5 a.m. and come home at 11 p.m., covered in sawdust and concrete dust, too exhausted to do anything but shower and collapse into bed. Ryan and I were left to figure out life on our own. We made our own meals, did our own laundry, got ourselves to school and back, but we had each other. And we had Sullivan Construction, which became our lifeline, our connection to Dad, our way of feeling like we still mattered to someone that I started helping with the books that summer. Dad's paperwork was a disaster, invoices piled everywhere, receipts shoved into random drawers. I spent 3 weeks organizing everything, creating a basic filing system, learning QuickBooks from YouTube videos. By September, I was handling all the accounts payable and receivable after school. Ryan started working weekends on job sites when he turned 17. He learned framing from Miguel, our lead carpenter, learned electrical from Tony, who'd been with Dad since the beginning, learned plumbing from a contractor named Dennis who worked so fast he made everyone else look like they were moving in slow motion. We found purpose in that work, found a way to connect with Dad again, even if he was too buried in grief to really see us. And we found each other, became closer than most siblings ever get, because we understood the same loss and were trying to fill the same void. By 2007, I was running the financial side of Sullivan Construction while finishing high school. I'd automated our billing system, negotiated better rates with suppliers, and created cash flow projections that actually helped Dad plan for the future instead of just reacting to whatever crisis hit that week. Ryan graduated and went full-time on the cruise. He was a natural leader, the guy everyone wanted to work with because he never asked anyone to do something he wouldn't do himself. He'd be up on scaffolding in 110-degree heat right alongside the crew, and they loved him for it. Then 2008 hit, and everything nearly fell apart. The recession destroyed the construction industry in Arizona. Projects were canceled overnight. Developers went bankrupt. Companies that had been around for 30 years disappeared in months. We went from 8 active projects to 2 in the span of 6 weeks. Dad was ready to give up. I'll never forget him sitting at the kitchen table in our old house, head in his hand, saying, "Maybe it's time to close down. Cut our losses before we lose everything." That I was 20 years old, midway through my junior year at Arizona State, and I refused to let that happen. I spent 72 hours running scenarios, analyzing our assets, finding every possible way to keep us afloat. We had equipment worth $400,000 that was just sitting idle. We had 3 trucks we didn't need. We had office space we were barely using. I put together a survival plan. Sell the excess equipment and trucks. Downsize the office. Cut overhead by 60%. Focus exclusively on residential remodeling and small commercial repairs, the projects people still needed even in a recession. Target property management companies that had to maintain their buildings regardless of the economy. Dad looked at my spreadsheets and financial projections like I'd just handed him a life raft. "You really think this will work?" "I know it will," I told him. "But we have to move fast." That we did. Within 2 months, we'd restructured everything. Ryan shifted his focus to managing smaller crews for the residential work, building relationships with property managers who controlled hundreds of units. I negotiated payment terms with suppliers that kept our cash flow positive even when clients were slow to pay. We survived 2008. We survived 2009. And by 2010, when the market started recovering, we were one of the few construction companies in Phoenix still standing, with a reputation for reliability that brought clients flooding back. Dad looked at Ryan and me differently after that, not as his kids who helped out, but as genuine partners who'd saved his life's work. "You too are going to run this company someday," he said at Thanksgiving 2010, raising his beer. "And you're going to do it better than I ever could." The next decade was golden. We expanded into Nevada, then Southern California. We moved from residential remodeling back into commercial construction, but this time with better financial controls and more diverse client relationships. We grew from 8 employees to 80. Our annual revenue went from $800,000 to $8.70 million that Ryan's charisma brought in the big contracts. He'd take clients to Suns games, play golf with developers, host barbecues where business happened naturally over beer and steaks. In 2015, he landed us a $2 million contract to build a medical office complex in Tempe by befriending the developer's son at a charity golf tournament. That single project led to 4 more with the same development group. I kept us profitable through smart bidding, careful project management, and financial planning that ensured we always had enough cash reserves to weather slow periods. When material costs spiked in 2017, I'd already locked in prices with suppliers 6 months earlier. When labor shortages hit in 2019, I'd already built relationships with 3 subcontracting firms that could fill our gaps. We were the dream team Dad always said we were. At least, that's what I believed until about 6 months ago when things started to feel off. The change was subtle at first. Ryan started taking phone calls in his truck instead of his office. When I'd ask who called, he'd say just a subcontractor, or nothing important. But his body language told a different story. Tension in his shoulders, eyes that wouldn't quite meet mine. He started asking weird questions about Dad's finances. "Does Dad have any accounts you don't track?" he asked one day in July, trying to sound casual as we reviewed quarterly numbers. "What do you mean?" I looked up from my laptop, like personal accounts, investments, anything separate from the business, just his personal checking and a small retirement fund. Why? No reason. Just wondering. But his jaw was tight, his fingers drumming on the conference room table point 2 weeks later. He asked if Dad had ever mentioned international investments or offshore planning. When I said no, he changed the subject so fast it was like the conversation never happened. Then there were the disappearances. Ryan started taking long lunches with no explanation. He'd be gone for 3 hours and come back vague about where he'd been. Had to check on a supplier. Met with a potential client. But when I'd follow up later, asking how the meeting went, he'd look confused, like he'd forgotten his own lie. Dad noticed too. In August, he pulled me aside after a Sunday dinner at his house in Scottsdale. Ryan had left early, claiming he had paperwork to catch up on. "Nicole, honey," Dad said, refilling his scotch glass. "I need to tell you something. What's wrong?" He stared out the window at the pool where Ryan and I used to swim as kids. "If anything happens to me, I need you to watch the numbers. Always watch the numbers. They tell the truth when people won't." My chest tightened. "Dad, what are you talking about? Are you sick?" No, nothing like that." He waved his hand dismissively. "I'm just saying, in business and life, the numbers don't lie. People do. Trust but verify. That's the golden rule." "Are you talking about Ryan?" "I'm talking about everyone, even family." He looked at me then, and there was something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Fear, maybe, or regret. Especially family. I tried to get him to explain, but he shut down, said he was just being philosophical after too much whiskey. But those words haunted me. Watch the numbers. Trust, but verify. Then Dad died, sudden and shocking, on a Friday afternoon in October. Heart attack while reviewing blueprints. By the time the ambulance arrived, he was gone. At the funeral, I held Ryan's hand through the service. Both of us crying as the pastor talked about Dad's legacy, his work ethic, his devotion to family after Mom died. We were supposed to lean on each other through this grief. Supposed to become even closer without Dad as our anchor. But when Mitchell Brennan mentioned the will reading, something changed in Ryan's face. That warmth I'd known my entire life vanished, replaced by something I couldn't name, but recognized as dangerous. His eyes went cold, calculating, like he was running numbers in his head, and the equation didn't balance in his favor. I watched him take those phone calls outside during the reception. Watched him pace and gesture, his voice too low to hear, but his agitation clear as glass. Watched him come back inside with a forced smile that didn't reach his eyes. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying Dad's warning. Watch the numbers. Trust but verify. People lie. My gut was screaming that something was deeply, fundamentally wrong. Every instinct I had, every pattern recognition skill that made me good at my job, was firing off alarm bells. The brother I thought I knew was hiding something. Something big enough to make him cold at the mention of Dad's will. Something important enough to make him lie about phone calls and meetings. If you've ever had that gut feeling that someone you love is hiding something, type "trust your instincts" in the comments below. Because what I was about to do would either prove me paranoid or reveal a betrayal I never saw coming, that I made a decision that Wednesday night, 2 days before the scheduled will reading, I was going to test Ryan. Not because I wanted to catch him doing something wrong, but because I desperately needed him to prove my suspicions false. I needed him to show me I was wrong, that the grief was making me see threats where none existed, that my brother was still my brother. The plan was simple. Tell him Dad left everything to me. Watch his reaction. See if he'd be honest about any financial arrangements I didn't know about, or if he'd pretend everything was fine while hiding whatever secrets were making him take those phone calls outside. IT was a trap, yes, but it was also a lifeline I was throwing to the brother I loved, giving him one last chance to come clean before whatever he was hiding destroyed us, both. That I texted him Thursday morning. Can you meet me at Dad's house in Scottsdale? 2 p.m.? I need to talk about something before tomorrow's will reading. He responded immediately. Of course. Everything okay? We'll talk when you get there. I drove to Scottsdale that afternoon with my heart hammering against my ribs. The house where we grew up, where Mom died, where Dad had spent his last years alone. It felt fitting, somehow, that this test would happen in the place where our family had both formed and fallen apart. That Ryan's truck pulled into the driveway at exactly 2 p.m. He'd always been punctual, reliable, trustworthy, at least. That's who I thought he was. The house in Scottsdale looked exactly the same as it had at Mom's funeral 20 years ago. Same desert landscaping with barrel cacti and palo verde trees. Same terracotta roof tiles baking under the Arizona sun. Same wooden front door with the brass knocker Dad never got around to polishing, that I stood in the driveway for 5 minutes before going inside. Key in hand, trying to steady my breathing. The house had been our sanctuary once. The place where Mom made pancakes on Saturday mornings and Dad taught us to play chess at the dining room table. The place where Ryan and I had spent countless nights after Mom died, eating takeout and watching movies, trying to fill the silence she'd left behind. Now it felt like a stage set for something I didn't want to perform, that I let myself in through the front door. The air conditioning was still running on Dad's program schedule, keeping the house at 72 degrees, even though no one lived here anymore. Everything was frozen in time. Dad's reading glasses on the coffee table, his coffee mug in the sink, the blueprints he'd been reviewing when his heart stopped, still spread across his desk in the study. That I walked through the living room to the kitchen, my heels clicking on the tile floor. The back patio was visible through the sliding glass door, the pool shimmering in the afternoon heat. That's where Ryan would go when he wanted privacy. That's where he'd taken all those mysterious phone calls at the funeral reception. That I rehearsed my lie one more time, standing at the kitchen island where Mom used to prep dinner every night. Mitchell called me this morning. Dad left everything to me. The business, the house, all the accounts. Everything. The words felt wrong in my mouth. Dad would never do that. He'd always talked about Ryan and me as equal partners. Always made it clear we were both his legacy. But that was the point. If Ryan believed it, if he thought I'd somehow manipulated Dad or been favored over him, how would he react? Would he be happy for me? Concerned? Angry? Or would he reveal whatever he'd been hiding for the past 6 months? At 2:03 p.m., I heard Ryan's truck in the driveway. The door opened a minute later. Nick? His voice echoed through the house. He'd called me Nick since I was 8 years old. Where are you? Kitchen. That he walked in looking tired, wearing jeans and a Sullivan Construction polo shirt with concrete dust on the sleeves. His hair needed a cut, and there were dark circles under his eyes I hadn't noticed at the funeral. Grief, I'd assumed, but now I wondered if it was something else. Stress, fear, guilt. Hey, he pulled me into a hug, and for a moment everything felt normal. He smelled like he always did, like sawdust and coffee and the cologne he'd worn since college. My big brother, my partner. My best friend, I almost backed out right then. Almost said, never mind, I was being paranoid. Let's just get through tomorrow's while reading together like we planned, but Dad's voice was in my head. Watch the numbers. Trust, but verify. I pulled back and gestured to the kitchen table. We need to talk. Something flickered in his eyes. Okay, what's going on? We sat across from each other at the table where we'd done homework as kids, where Dad had taught us to review contracts, where we'd celebrated every major company milestone with champagne and take-out Chinese food. Mitchell called me this morning, I said, keeping my voice steady. There was an issue with the will reading tomorrow. He needed to give me some information early. Ryan's entire body went still. What kind of issue? Here it was, the moment of truth. Dad left everything to me, Ryan. The business, this house, all the bank accounts, everything. It's all in my name. The silence that followed felt like falling off a cliff. Ryan's jaw clenched so hard I heard his teeth grind together. His hands, resting on the table, curled into fists. And his eyes, those warm brown eyes I'd known my entire life, went completely flat. Cold, like someone had flipped a switch and turned off everything that made him my brother. But then he blinked, and the warmth flooded back. He forced a smile that didn't come close to reaching his eyes. Of course, he said quietly. Dad always knew what he was doing. Why heart sank. That was the wrong answer. The Ryan I knew would have been shocked, confused, demanding to know why Dad would do that. He would have asked if I was sure if Mitchell had made a mistake. If there was some explanation, he wouldn't have said, of course, like he'd been expecting it. There's a letter, I continued, watching his face. Dad said he trusted me to take care of you, but everything's in my name. The will is very specific. When did he write it? Ryan's voice was carefully neutral. 6 months ago. Something flashed across his face. Recognition. Like I'd just confirmed something. He already knew. 6 months, he repeated. Right, are you okay? I asked, genuinely unsure now if I was testing a conspiracy or torturing a grieving brother who was just trying to process difficult news. Yeah, I'm fine. He stood abruptly, nearly knocking over his chair. Just need some air. This is a lot to take in. He walked to the sliding glass door and stepped onto the patio. I watched him pull out his phone, his fingers shaking slightly as he scrolled through his contacts. He selected a number and held the phone to his ear. Turning away from the house, my heart was racing. This was it. Whatever secrets he'd been keeping, whoever he'd been calling, I was about to find out. I stood slowly, moving toward the sliding door. The glass was closed, but there was a gap where the seal had worn out years ago. If I got close enough, I might be able to hear. I crept closer, pressing myself against the wall beside the doorframe. Ryan was pacing back and forth by the pool, one hand gesturing as he spoke, and then I heard it. 2 words that made my blood turn to ice. Uncle Phil. Uncle Phil. My father's younger brother. The man who died in a car accident in 2010, 15 years ago. I'd been at his funeral. I'd watched them lower his casket into the ground at the same cemetery where Mom was buried. But Ryan was talking to him like he was alive. I pressed closer to the gap in the seal. My breath caught in my throat. I don't care what it takes, Ryan was saying, his voice low and urgent. She can't know about the offshore accounts. If she starts digging, if she sees those bank statements from the Caymans, everything falls apart. Offshore accounts. Cayman Islands. What the hell was he talking about? No, she has no idea Dad was moving money for years, Ryan continued. The lawyer doesn't know either. Dad set it up through me, exclusively, remember? Just you and me, and DAD. My legs felt weak. I gripped the door frame to stay upright. Almost $800,000 she doesn't know exists. Once this blows over and she signs those transfer papers thinking she's getting everything, we split it just like Dad planned. The business goes to her along with all the debt and tax liability. We take the real money and disappear. The room was spinning. $800,000. Offshore accounts. Transfer papers. They'd planned this. Dad and Ryan had planned to rob me blind, to saddle me with a business full of debt while they split hidden money I never knew existed. And Uncle Phil was alive. Somehow, impossibly, the uncle I'd mourned 15 years ago was alive and part of this conspiracy. She fell for it completely, Ryan said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. Thinks Dad left her everything. Has no clue it's a shell game. By the time she realizes what happened, we'll be long gone, damn. My chest felt like it was caving in. This wasn't a test anymore. This was the complete destruction of everything I'd believed about my family, my father, my brother. I need you to stay in Cayman for now, Ryan continued. Don't come back until I give the all clear. Once Nicole signs the papers and I get my copy of the will, we'll execute the final transfers. 2 weeks max, and we're set for life. He was quiet for a moment, listening to whatever Uncle Phil was saying. Yeah, I know it's harsh, Ryan said, and his voice softened slightly. She's my sister, but Dad made his choice. He knew she'd never go along with it, never understand why we had to move the money offshore, why we had to protect the real assets. She's too rigid, too by the book. This is the only way, too rigid, too by the book. I was the one who'd saved the company during the recession. I was the one who'd built the financial systems that made us profitable. And my reward was being set up as the fall guy while they disappeared with money they'd stolen from the company I'd helped build. Ryan laughed at something Uncle Phil said. No, she definitely doesn't suspect Uncle Phil is alive. She probably hasn't thought about you in years. The car accident cover story was perfect that I'd cried at that funeral. I'd given a eulogy about Uncle Phil teaching me to fish when I was 10, about how he'd been there for us after Mom died. All of it had been a lie. He'd faked his death and been living in the Cayman Islands for 15 years, apparently helping my father hide money. Okay, I'll call you tomorrow after the official reading, Ryan said. Play it cool. Act disappointed but supportive. Nicole's smart, but she's not suspicious. She trusts me. He paused. Yeah, I feel bad about it too. But family is family, and Dad's decision was final. She gets the business. We get the future. That's when I made my mistake. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I'd forgotten to silence it. The sound was soft, barely audible, but in the quiet house it might as well have been a fire alarm. Ryan stopped mid-sentence. He turned slowly, phone still pressed to his ear, and looked directly at the sliding glass door. Our eyes met through the glass. For a moment, neither of us moved. We just stared at each other, the truth hanging between us like broken glass. Then Ryan smiled, but it wasn't my brother's smile. It wasn't the grin I'd seen 1,000 times across dinner tables and construction sites and Sunday barbecues. This was something else entirely. Something cold and calculated and utterly foreign. It was the smile of a stranger wearing my brother's face. He said something quick into the phone and ended the call, never breaking eye contact with me. Then he slid open the door and stepped back into the kitchen. How much did you hear? His voice was flat, emotionless that I couldn't speak. My throat had closed up, my mind desperately trying to process what I'd just learned. Dad was a criminal. Uncle Phil was alive. Ryan had been planning to rob me for months, maybe years. Nicole. He stepped closer. How much? All of it, I finally managed. The offshore accounts. Uncle Phil. The plan to leave me with debt while you take the money. He closed his eyes briefly, then opened them with something like resignation. So you lied about the will. Mitchell hasn't called me at all. Smart. He actually looked impressed. Dad always said you were the smart one. Guess he was right. Dad was part of this. My voice broke. He planned to steal from me. His own daughter. He planned to protect the family assets from an IRS audit that's coming, Ryan corrected. There's a difference to be why framing me? By making me responsible for debt I didn't create. You would have inherited a failing business and spent years trying to fix problems you'd never solve because the money was already gone. This way you get a clean break. The company goes under, you walk away, start fresh, while you and Dad disappear with $800,000, while we protect what's left of the family wealth. Yesterday I stared at him. This man who looked like my brother, but spoke like a completely different person. "Who are you?" "I'm the same person I've always been," he said quietly. "You just never bothered to look close enough, and that's when I realized the truth. I hadn't been testing my brother's loyalty. I'd been discovering that the person I thought I knew, the partner I'd trusted for 20 years, had never really existed at all, and my brother was a stranger. And he'd been one all along that I stood in that kitchen staring at Ryan, my mind racing through 1,000 possible responses. I could scream at him, demand answers, call the police, call Mitchell, do something, anything, to fight back against the betrayal that was crushing my chest like a physical weight. But Dad's voice was in my head again. "Watch the numbers. They tell the truth when people won't." So instead, I did something Ryan wasn't expecting. "I lied that you're right," I said, forcing my voice to stay level. "I shouldn't have tested you. I'm sorry. The grief is making me paranoid." Ryan's eyes narrowed slightly. "What?" "I heard you say Uncle Phil's name, and I freaked out. Started imagining conspiracies that don't exist." I managed a shaky laugh. "You were probably talking to someone named Phil, and my brain just went to crazy places. Nicole, can we just forget this happened?" I looked at him with what I hoped was embarrassment rather than rage. "I'm not thinking clearly. Tomorrow we'll go to the will reading together, find out what Dad actually left us, and deal with reality instead of my paranoid fantasies." He studied my face for a long moment. I kept my expression open, vulnerable, apologetic. Everything he'd expect from his little sister who'd just made a fool of herself. Finally, he relaxed slightly. "Yeah, okay. The stress is getting to both of us. I'm sorry for ambushing you like this. It's fine." He moved toward the door, but there was still wariness in his eyes. "Get some rest, Nick. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." After he left, I waited exactly 10 minutes to make sure he was really gone. Then I locked every door and window in that house and went straight to Dad's study. The room was exactly as Dad had left it. Mahogany desk cluttered with blueprints and project bids. Bookshelves lined with construction manuals and financial records. The leather chair where he died, still pushed back from the desk at an odd angle like he'd stood up suddenly when the heart attack hit. And on the wall behind the desk, Mom's portrait, she'd had it painted for their 20th anniversary, 2 years before the cancer diagnosis. She was 46 in that painting, wearing a blue dress that matched her eyes, smiling the way she used to smile before hospitals and chemotherapy stole that brightness from her face. I'd passed this portrait 1,000 times without really seeing it. But now, standing in Dad's study at 6 p.m. with my entire world crumbling, I looked at it with different eyes. Dad had always been sentimental about Mom. He'd kept her photo on his desk, her favorite coffee mug in the kitchen cabinet, her gardening gloves in the garage. But he'd spent tens of thousands of dollars on this portrait and positioned it directly behind his desk, where he'd see it every single day. Why? I walked closer, studying the frame. It was heavy, ornate, bolted to the wall with serious hardware. Not the kind of thing you'd move easily. Unless you needed to access something behind. I teed it. My hands were shaking as I reached up and tried to shift the frame. It didn't budge. I ran my fingers along the edges, feeling for a latch or release mechanism. Nothing. Then I remembered something. When Ryan and I were kids, Dad used to quiz us on important dates. Mom's birthday, their anniversary, the day Sullivan Construction was founded. "Numbers matter," he'd say. "Remember the important ones." Mom's birthday was June 14th, 1959. 6/14/59 that I found the small keypad hidden on the right side of the frame, nearly invisible against the decorative scrollwork. I entered the numbers. 061459. Something clicked. The frame swung away from the wall on hidden hinges, revealing a wall safe. The combination lock stared at me, waiting. I tried Mom's birthday again in different formats. 614, 0614, 141959. Nothing worked. Then I tried the date she died. March 7th, 2005. 30705. The safe opened. Inside were 4 leather-bound journals, a thumb drive, a folder thick with documents and 3 passports. I pulled everything out with trembling hands and spread it across Dad's desk. The passports hit me first. One was Dad's, normal and official, but the other 2 made my stomach drop. One was Ryan's legitimate passport. The other was also Ryan's face, but with a different name, Ryan Mitchell, issued by the Cayman Islands government. The third passport was for someone named Philip Mitchell. The photo showed a man in his late 50s with silver hair and Dad's jawline, Uncle Phil. Alive and carrying a fake identity. Did I open the folder next? Bank statements from Grand Cayman National Bank, all addressed to various shell companies. Sullivan Holdings Limited, Desert Investments International, Phoenix Property Group, LLC. The amounts made my head spin. $237,000 in one account, $412,000 in another, $186,000 in a third. That I grabbed a calculator and started adding. By the time I'd worked through all 15 bank statements, the total was $843,000 hidden in offshore accounts I'd never known existed. The shell company documents showed a pattern. Money would be invoiced from Sullivan Construction to these companies for consulting fees or property management services. The payments were always just under $10,000, small enough to avoid federal reporting requirements. Spread out over years, they'd siphoned nearly $1 million from the business I thought I'd been helping to build. My breath was coming in short gasps. I forced myself to slow down, to think like the financial analyst I was instead of the betrayed daughter I felt like. The thumb drive was next. I plugged it into Dad's computer and found dozens of encrypted email exchanges between 3 accounts. Dad's personal email, an account registered to RM, that had to be Ryan, and another registered to PM, presumably Uncle Phil. The encryption was sophisticated, but Dad had left a text file with the password, Catherine Marie 2005. Mom's full name and the year she died. That I opened the emails and started reading. The earliest ones were from 2006, just a year after Mom's funeral. The account is established. $50,000 transferred successfully. No flags from IRS. We can increase the amounts gradually. Thank you, Phil. This is the only way to protect what I've built. After Catherine's medical bills bankrupted me once, I won't let it happen again. Dad, are you sure about this? Nicole's really good with the books. What if she notices? Your sister sees what I want her to see. She's talented, but naive. She trusts me completely. That trust is our greatest asset. That I had to stop reading. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely control the mouse. Dad had called my trust an asset, something to be exploited, not something to be honored or protected, but a vulnerability he deliberately used against me. I opened one of the journals. Dad's handwriting filled the pages, neat and methodical. Ryan knows about the offshore accounts now. He caught me moving money last week. I expected anger, but instead, he asked how he could help. He understands what Nicole never will have. Sometimes you have to break rules to protect what matters. Nicole would turn me in to the IRS if she knew. She's too rigid, too committed to doing things the right way. She doesn't understand that her right way would destroy everything I've built. The recession nearly exposed everything. Nicole's financial analysis almost caught the discrepancies. I had to create fake invoices for 3 months to cover the gaps. She's brilliant, which makes her dangerous. Ryan suggested bringing her into the plan, but I refused. She'd never understand. Better to let her believe she's running the financial side while Ryan and I protect the real assets. Phil's cover is holding perfectly. Everyone still believes he died in that car accident. The Cayman accounts are growing steadily. When I'm gone, Ryan will execute the final phase. Nicole inherits the company and its debts. Ryan and Phil split the offshore money. It's not fair to her, but it's necessary. She's too honest to survive what's coming. What the hell did that mean? I kept reading, my horror growing with each entry. Ryan asked again about including Nicole. He feels guilty about deceiving her. I told him guilt is a luxury we can't afford. When the IRS audit hits, and it will hit, probably within 2 years of my death, Nicole will be protected by ignorance. She can legitimately claim she knew nothing about the offshore accounts. Ryan and I will be long gone, and she'll walk away clean. An IRS audit. That's what Ryan had mentioned on the phone. They weren't just stealing from the company. They were protecting themselves from prosecution by setting me up as an unwitting accomplice. Nicole saved the company again today. New contract worth $1.2 million. She's remarkable, truly. Sometimes I wish I could tell her the truth, bring her into the plan. But I know her. She'd refuse the offshore accounts, insist on paying back every penny, probably turn me in. Her integrity is absolute, which is exactly why I can't trust her with this, and why integrity was a liability. My honesty was a weakness. My trust was a tool. The most recent entry was from 3 weeks before Dad died. Met with my cardiologist today. The prognosis isn't good. 6 months, maybe a year. I need to accelerate the timeline. The will is updated everything to Nicole on paper. Everything that matters to Ryan in reality. I've instructed Ryan to test her after I'm gone, to see if she suspects anything. If she does, he'll need to act quickly to secure the assets before she can freeze the accounts. I'm sorry to leave her with this mess, but I'm more sorry that she's exactly the kind of person who'd do the right thing even if it destroyed her. I loved her mother too much to let her daughter make that mistake. The journal slipped from my hands. Dad had known he was dying. He'd known for months. And instead of telling me, instead of preparing me, he'd spent his last weeks perfecting a scheme to rob me blind. The room was closing in. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what I was reading. Why father was a criminal. My brother had been lying to me for more than a decade. My uncle had faked his death and been living in luxury in the Caribbean while I mourned him. And all of it, every single betrayal, had been built on my trust, my hard work, my naive belief that we were a family. That I grabbed the next journal, dated 2010. The year Uncle Phil supposedly died. Phil's death went perfectly. The car accident looked completely legitimate. Nicole cried at the funeral, gave a beautiful eulogy about fishing trips and family barbecues. She has no idea Phil is sitting on a beach in Grand Cayman laughing at how well we pulled it off. Ryan was nervous about maintaining the lie, but I reminded him this protects all of us. Phil was drowning in debt. His creditors were circling. Now he's legally dead, his debts are wiped out, and he can help us manage the offshore accounts without any complications. Everyone wins except the people Phil owed money to, and honestly, they were predatory lenders who deserved to lose that I'd given a eulogy. I'd stood in front of 150 people and talked about a man who was alive and hiding in the Caribbean to escape his debts. I'd cried real tears for someone who'd been laughing at me the entire time. Has anyone you trusted completely ever turned out to be someone you never really knew? Drop a fire emoji in the comments if this hits home, because what I was discovering in my father's study that night didn't just break my heart. It shattered my entire understanding of who I was and where I came from. I spent the next 6 hours reading every journal entry, every email, every bank statement. By midnight, I had the complete picture, and it was so much worse than I'd imagined. Dad had started embezzling in 2006, supposedly to protect against future medical emergencies after Mom's cancer bills devastated us. But the journals showed something darker. He'd enjoyed it, enjoyed outsmarting the IRS, enjoyed building his hidden empire, enjoyed the power of controlling information that I didn't have. Ryan had known since 2007, 18 years old and already complicit in fraud, the brother who'd helped me through Mom's death, who'd worked alongside me to build the company, had been stealing from it the entire time. Every Sunday dinner, every business meeting, every conversation about company strategy had been a performance, while he and Dad moved money I couldn't see. Uncle Phil had faked his death to escape $300,000 in gambling debts and child support payments. The car accident had been staged in Nevada with a body from a morgue that Phil had paid off. The man I'd mourned was a deadbeat dad who'd abandoned his own kids to live in paradise on stolen money. And me? I'd been the perfect mark. Trustworthy, skilled, completely blind to what was happening under my nose. I'd built the financial systems that made their fraud possible, created the legitimate revenue that covered up their offshore transfers, worked 70-hour weeks to grow a company they were systematically looting. The anger hit around 2 a.m. I threw one of the journals across the room, watched it hit the wall and fall behind Dad's desk. Threw another, then another. I wanted to destroy everything in that office, burn the house down, erase every trace of the family I'd believed in. But then I stopped, stood in the middle of Dad's study surrounded by evidence of 15 years of fraud, and made a different choice. They'd been playing the long game, building their conspiracy slowly, carefully, assuming I'd never be smart enough to figure it out. Time to show them exactly how wrong they were. I gathered every document, every journal, every bank statement. I copied the thumb drive and uploaded everything to 3 different cloud storage accounts. I took photos of every passport, every piece of evidence that proved what they'd done. Then I called someone I'd been avoiding. Detective Janet Morrison, a financial crimes investigator I'd met 2 years ago when Sullivan Construction had been a victim of contractor fraud. We'd worked together to catch the guy, and she'd given me her card. "Call me if you ever need help with anything financial," she'd said. It was 3 a.m. She answered on the 4th ring. "This is Morrison. Detective, this is Nicole Sullivan. I'm sorry to call so late, but I need to report a crime." "What kind of crime?" I looked at the evidence spread across Dad's desk. The journals, the bank statements, the proof that my entire life had been built on lies, embezzlement, fraud, money laundering, and possibly conspiracy to defraud the IRS. "Who's the victim?" "Me," I said. "And I'm also the only one who didn't know it was happening." Detective Morrison arrived at Dad's house at 6 a.m. with 2 federal agents from the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. I'd spent the 3 hours between my phone call and their arrival organizing every piece of evidence into a timeline that even a jury could follow. "This is extensive," Morrison said, flipping through the bank statements I'd laid out across the dining room table. "How long do you think this has been going on?" 19 years. Since 2006. I handed her the earliest journal. "My father started it to protect against future medical emergencies after my mother's cancer bills. But it evolved into something else." Special Agent Chin, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and graying hair, studied the offshore account documents. "These shell companies are sophisticated, professional-level fraud. Your father didn't do this alone. No. My brother Ryan has been involved since 2007, and my uncle, Philip Sullivan, who supposedly died in 2010. I showed them the passport with Uncle Phil's photo and fake name. He's been managing the offshore accounts from Grand Cayman. "We'll need time to verify all of this," Agent Chin said. "Build a case that will hold up in court. That means surveillance, financial analysis, possibly wiretaps. How long?" "Months, potentially." I shook my head. "The will reading is tomorrow at 10 a.m. Ryan thinks I don't know anything. Once he realizes I'm onto him, he'll move the money and disappear. We have days, maybe hours, not months." Morrison exchanged a glance with Agent Chin. "What are you suggesting?" "I want to hire a private investigator. Someone who can move faster than federal bureaucracy. Get me proof of where Uncle Phil is living, what properties they own, how the money moves. Then I'll hand everything to you on a silver platter ready for prosecution." "That's dangerous," Morrison warned. "If your brother suspects you're investigating, he already suspects. I caught him on the phone yesterday discussing the offshore accounts. I convinced him I didn't hear anything important, but he's going to be watching me closely." Agent Chin closed the folder she'd been reviewing. "If you hire a private investigator, we can't officially sanction it. But if evidence happens to come to us through legitimate channels, we won't refuse it. In other words, they were giving me permission to do their job faster than they could." I called my lawyer Mitchell at 7 a.m., waking him up. Nicole? What's wrong? I need a private investigator. The best one you know. Someone who specializes in financial crimes and international work. Can I ask what this is about? The less you know right now, the better. Can you give me a name or not? He was quiet for a moment. David Reeves. Former FBI, now runs his own firm. Expensive, but worth every penny. I'll text you his number. David Reeves met me at a coffee shop in downtown Phoenix at 9 a.m. He was in his 50s, built like someone who still worked out daily, with gray stubble and eyes that missed nothing that I handed him a thumb drive. Everything's on here. Bank statements, journals, emails, photos. I need to know where my uncle is living, what properties they own, and proof that my brother has been visiting him. He plugged the thumb drive into his laptop and spent 20 minutes reading in silence. When he looked up, his expression was grim. This is federal-level fraud. You should be talking to the FBI, not a PI that I already talked to the IRS. They move too slowly. I need answers. Now, what's your timeline? 3 days. The will reading is tomorrow. After that, my brother will start executing whatever exit strategy they've planned. 3 days. He laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. You're asking for miracles. I'm asking for the truth. Name your price point. $50,000. Half up front, half when I deliver. That I didn't hesitate. Done. I'll wire the first payment within the hour. He studied me carefully. You understand that what you find might be worse than what you already know. It can't be worse than what I've already discovered, that I was wrong about that. David called me at 3 p.m. the next day, 6 hours before the scheduled will reading. I've got preliminary findings. You're going to want to sit down for this. I was in my condo, papers spread across every surface as I prepared my own case file. Tell me, your Uncle Philip Sullivan is alive and living in a beachfront villa in Grand Cayman worth approximately $4 million. The property is owned by a shell company called Phoenix Holdings International, registered in the Caymans with your father listed as the beneficial owner. After your father's death 3 weeks ago, ownership transferred to your brother Ryan. $4 million. They hadn't just been hiding money. They'd been building an empire. There's more, David continued. I found 3 other properties. A condo in Dubai worth $2.3 million, a chalet in Switzerland worth $1.8 million, and a ranch in Argentina worth $900,000, all owned through shell companies, all with the same ownership structure. Your father established them. Your brother inherited them. My calculator was already out. That's over $9 million in real estate alone, plus the $843,000 in liquid offshore accounts you already found, plus whatever other assets I haven't uncovered yet. Your family wasn't just committing fraud. They were operating an international money laundering operation that I felt sick. What about Ryan? Have you confirmed he's been visiting Uncle Phil? 3 times in the past year. I pulled flight records showing Ryan Mitchell using his Cayman passport, flying from Los Angeles to Grand Cayman. February 2025, June 2025, and September 2025. The last trip was 2 weeks before your father died. 2 weeks before Dad died. Ryan had known Dad was sick, had known the timeline was accelerating, and had said nothing to me while I worked 70-hour weeks trying to close year-end contracts. I also found something else, David said, his voice careful. Social media posts. Your uncle isn't exactly keeping a low profile. What do you mean? Check your email. I'm sending you a folder. I open my laptop. The folder contains screenshots from Facebook and Instagram accounts under the name Philip Mitchell. Uncle Phil's face smiled out from dozens of photos. Phil on a yacht. Phil at a beachside restaurant. Phil playing golf with other expats. And in several recent photos, Ryan stood beside him, both of them holding drinks and grinning like they were on vacation instead of hiding from federal prosecution. One photo was dated September 20th, 2025. Ryan and Phil standing on a balcony overlooking the ocean, arms around each other's shoulders. The caption read, planning for the future with family. Life is good in paradise, planning for the future. 2 weeks before Dad died, Ryan was in the Caymans planning his exit strategy, while I thought we were partners preparing to run the company together. I clicked through more photos. Phil, with a blonde woman who looked to be in her 40s, identified as his girlfriend Laura. Phil at charity galas. Phil living a life of luxury funded by money stolen from the company I'd helped build. There's one more thing you need to see, David said. I found the real will. What? In the Cayman property records. Your father filed a document there as part of establishing the trusts for the properties. It includes a copy of what appears to be his actual will, different from the one filed with your Arizona lawyer. And my hands were shaking as I opened the final document in David's folder. The opening paragraphs were standard legal language. Then I reached the distribution of assets section. To my daughter Nicole Sullivan. I leave all ownership and controlling interest in Sullivan Construction, LLC, including all equipment, real property, contracts, and business debts. She has worked tirelessly to build this company and deserves to see it continue under her leadership. That sounded good. That sounded like Dad actually valued my work. Then I kept reading that, To my son Ryan Sullivan. I leave all international holdings managed through Phoenix Holdings International and subsidiary companies, including but not limited to properties in Grand Cayman, Dubai, Switzerland, and Argentina. I also leave all offshore accounts managed by Philip Mitchell on behalf of the Sullivan Family Trust. It is my intention that Nicole shall maintain Sullivan Construction as a legitimate domestic business operation, while Ryan shall manage the international investments that have secured our family's future. The separation of these assets protects both parties from legal complications that may arise from aggressive IRS audits. He'd known they were coming, known that his fraud would eventually be discovered, and he'd structured everything so that I would take the fall for the legitimate business, while Ryan disappeared with the stolen money. The will continued with one final paragraph that made my blood run cold. I have deliberately withheld information about the international holdings from Nicole. Her moral rigidity and commitment to legal compliance, while admirable, would prevent her from understanding the necessity of these arrangements. By keeping her ignorant of the offshore assets, I protect her from prosecution. She can legitimately claim she knew nothing about the international holdings. This is my final gift to her protection through ignorance. Dad had robbed me blind and called it a gift. Are you still there? David asked. Yeah. My voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. Send me everything you have. All the photos, all the property records, all the flight information. What are you going to do? Whatever I have to. After I hung up, I sat in my condo staring at Uncle Phil's smiling face on my laptop screen. He looked healthy, happy, completely unbothered by the fact that he'd faked his own death and abandoned his children to live in paradise on stolen money. My phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. Hey sis, want to meet for dinner before tomorrow's will reading? We should talk about next steps for the company. Next steps. He wanted to discuss how we'd handle the business he was planning to sabotage. I typed back. Sounds good. 7 p.m. at Dominic's? Perfect. See you then. He had no idea I knew everything. No idea I'd spent the last 36 hours building a case against him. No idea that federal agents were already reviewing the evidence I'd provided. My phone rang. Mitchell, my lawyer. Nicole, we need to talk about tomorrow's will reading. I received some unusual documents this morning. What kind of documents? Transfer papers. Ryan's attorney sent them over, requesting that you sign immediately after the will reading to expedite the transfer of business assets. He claims it's standard procedure to ensure smooth transition of ownership. Transfer papers. Of course, that's how they'd complete the scheme. Get me to sign documents that looked like standard business transfers, but actually gave Ryan legal authority to liquidate the company's real assets. What do these papers actually do? I asked. They grant Ryan co-signing authority on all Sullivan Construction bank accounts, authorize him to sell company equipment and property, and establish him as an alternate signatory for business decisions. Essentially, they give him power to act on behalf of the company without your explicit approval for each transaction. In other words, they let him drain every legitimate account and disappear before I realized what was happening. Do not sign those papers. I said it. I wasn't planning to recommend it. The language is concerning. But Ryan's attorney is insisting they're necessary for proper estate management, that Ryan's attorney is helping him commit fraud. Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. Tomorrow at the will reading, just read the will as filed and nothing else. Mitchell was quiet for a moment. Nicole, what's going on? I'll explain after the will reading. For now, just trust me. Do not let Ryan pressure you into any additional actions beyond reading the official will. I spent the rest of the afternoon preparing for dinner with Ryan. I knew what he'd do. He'd act concerned, supportive, maybe a little sad about Dad's death. He'd talk about how we needed to work together, how family was what mattered. He'd try to convince me to sign those transfer papers, frame it as helping him help me, make it sound like the logical next step, and I'd play along. Pretend I believed him. Pretend I didn't know about the offshore accounts, the fake will, the properties around the world built with money stolen from the company I dedicated my life to building. Because I needed him to feel safe. Needed him to think his plan was working. Needed him to keep talking so I could record every lie, every manipulation, every piece of evidence that would put him in federal prison for the next 20 years. T6:45 p.m. I put on a simple black dress and checked the recording device David had given me. It was hidden in a pendant around my neck, sophisticated enough to capture clear audio in a noisy restaurant, and my phone buzzed with another text from Ryan. Running a few minutes late. Order me a beer? Thanks, sis. He still called me that, like we were still the team we'd pretended to be for 20 years, that I looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back looked tired, betrayed, but also determined. I'd spent my entire adult life building something legitimate while my family built an empire of lies. Time to burn their empire to the ground. The dinner at Dominic's had gone exactly as I'd predicted. Ryan played the concerned brother perfectly, talking about how we needed to support each other through our grief, how Dad would want us to continue working together, how important it was that we present a united front during the will reading. He'd also spent 20 minutes explaining why I should sign those transfer papers. Just standard estate stuff, he'd said, spinning his beer bottle between his hands. Makes it easier for both of us to manage the business transition. You know how complicated these things can get? That I'd nodded along, asked questions, acted like I was actually considering it. The recording device captured every word, every lie, every manipulation, but I didn't arrange that dinner to gather evidence. I already had enough evidence to bury him. I arranged it to set up what came next. Ryan, I'd said as we were finishing dessert, I found some things in Dad's office. Documents I don't understand. Can you come by tomorrow morning before the will reading? Maybe bring someone who can help explain the financial stuff. His eyes had flickered with something concern, fear, but he'd masked it quickly. What kind of documents? Papers about offshore accounts. Shell companies. Some of it has Uncle Phil's name on it, which doesn't make sense because I'd let my voice trail off, plain confused instead of furious. I can definitely help with that, he'd said, his voice too casual. Dad had some complicated investments. I'll come by at 8 a.m. and we'll go through everything together. Thanks. I knew I could count on you. The lie had tasted like poison in my mouth. Now it was 7:45 a.m., and I stood in Dad's study waiting for my brother and my supposedly dead uncle to walk into the trap I'd set. Detective Morrison and Agent Chin were positioned in the next room with recording equipment. David Reeves had his cameras set up in 3 different locations. Mitchell, my lawyer, was on standby with legal documents that would change everything. The legitimate business assets had been secured. I'd filed emergency paperwork with the Arizona Secretary of State establishing sole ownership of Sullivan Construction under my name, effective immediately upon Dad's death. The offshore accounts were frozen. David's forensic accountant had worked magic with international banking authorities who were very interested in potential money laundering operations. The IRS had opened an official investigation. Everything was ready. I just needed them to walk through the door. At 8:03 a.m., I heard Ryan's truck in the driveway. Then another vehicle, something expensive from the sound of the engine. The front door opened. Ryan's voice called out, "Nick, we're here." We're plural. I took a breath and walked out of the study to the front hallway. Ryan stood there looking nervous despite his forced smile. And beside him, very much alive, was Uncle Phil. He'd aged since I'd last seen him 15 years ago. More silver in his hair, deeper lines around his eyes, a tan that came from years in the Caribbean sun. But it was definitely him. Philip Sullivan, my father's brother, who I'd eulogized at his funeral in 2010. Hi, Nicole. Phil said, like this was a normal family visit and not a dead man appearing in my father's house. It's been a long time that I let the shock show on my face. Let them think I was blindsided. Uncle Phil? But you died. The car accident. I was at your funeral. That's actually what we need to explain, Ryan said, moving into the living room. It's complicated, but Dad wanted to protect the family. Can we sit down? I followed them, my hand shaking just enough to seem authentic. We sat in the living room where I had spent 1,000 Sunday dinners. Phil and Ryan on the couch. Me and Dad's leather-chaired. I don't understand, I said. How are you alive? Why would Dad lie about that? Phil leaned forward, his voice gentle, like he was explaining something to a child. Nicole, your father loved you very much. Everything he did was to protect this family after your mother died. When the cancer bills bankrupted us, he had to make hard choices. What choices? Moving assets offshore, Ryan said. Protecting them from creditors, from the IRS, from anyone who might try to take what Dad built. Uncle Phil helped set everything up. The car accident was necessary to give him a clean slate, let him manage the accounts without legal complications. You faked your death to commit fraud, I said flatly. Phil's expression didn't change. I prefer to think of it as protecting family assets from an overreaching government, and Dad knew about this the whole time. Dad planned it, Ryan corrected. This was his vision, Nick. He built something bigger than just Sullivan Construction. He built a future for all of us. But he left everything to me. I watched their faces carefully. The will reading is in 2 hours. Mitchell said, Dad, left me the business, the house, everything. Ryan and Phil exchanged a glance. That's the public will, Ryan said. The one filed in Arizona. But there's another will, the real one, that Dad filed in the Caymans. That will splits everything properly. You get the business. I get the international holdings. What international holdings? Properties in Grand Cayman, Dubai, Switzerland, Argentina. About $9 million in real estate, plus the offshore accounts. It's your inheritance too, Nick. Your share of what Dad built. They were actually trying to sell me on this. Trying to make me complicit in fraud by framing it as my inheritance. Why didn't Dad tell me about any of this? I asked. Phil smiled sadly. Because you're like your mother. Too honest for your own good. Catherine would have turned Robert in to the authorities rather than compromise her principles. Dad loved that about both of you. But he also knew you'd never understand why these precautions were necessary. Oh, he lied to me for 19 years. He protected you, Ryan insisted. When the IRS audit comes, and it will come, you can legitimately say you knew nothing about the offshore accounts. You're protected by ignorance. We're the ones who'll take the legal risk. How generous, I said. My voice cold. Ryan's expression shifted slightly. Nick, you're upset. I get it. But this is what Dad wanted. The transfer papers I mentioned at dinner. They're part of the plan. You sign them, I can manage the liquidation of the business assets, and we all move forward with our inheritance. Liquidation! The business is going to collapse anyway, Phil said bluntly. The IRS investigation will destroy Sullivan Construction within 6 months. Dad knew that. Better to liquidate the assets now. Take what we can, and let the company die gracefully. You can start fresh somewhere else with your share of the offshore money. They'd planned everything. The fraud, the fake death, the collapse of the business I'd spent 15 years building. And they expected me to just go along with it because they called it my inheritance. I stood up slowly. "There's something I need to tell you." Ryan tensed. "What?" "Dad did confess everything. But not to you, Ryan. To me. 2 weeks before he died, the room went completely silent." "That's not possible," Phil said, his voice uncertain. "Dad called me to his house on September 28th. Said he needed to talk about something important. He was sitting right there." I pointed to the couch where Phil was sitting. "And he told me everything. The offshore accounts, the shell companies, Uncle Phil being alive. All of it." Ryan had gone pale. "You're lying. He was dying. The cardiologist had given him 6 months maximum. His conscience was eating him alive. He wanted to make it right before he went. Then why didn't you say anything?" Ryan demanded, "Because he asked me not to. He wanted to test you first. See if you'd come clean when he died, or if you'd try to execute the fraud anyway." I looked directly at my brother. "You failed that test." Phil stood up. "If this is true, if Robert told you everything, why play dumb? Why pretend you didn't know?" "Because Dad left me instructions. He recorded a video confession the day before he died, detailed every transaction, every account, every property. He told me exactly how to protect myself and how to make sure you couldn't complete the fraud." I pulled out my phone and played the video file. Dad's face appeared on screen, sitting in this same living room, looking thin and tired. "Nicole, if you're watching this, I'm gone. I need you to know that everything I did out of fear. After your mother died and the bills destroyed us, I was terrified of ever being helpless again. But fear made me into someone I'm ashamed of. I betrayed you. I used your trust as a weapon. I let Ryan believe we were partners in protecting the family when really we were just thieves." Ryan reached for the phone, but I pulled it back. Dad's voice continued. "I've given you everything you need to stop them. The evidence is in the safe behind your mother's portrait. Contact Detective Morrison at Phoenix PD Financial Crimes. She'll help you. And please, forgive me for waiting so long to tell you the truth." The video ended. Ryan's face had transformed from confident to desperate. "That video doesn't mean anything." He was sick, confused. "The offshore accounts are frozen," I said calmly. "I contacted the Cayman banking authorities 3 days ago with Dad's confession and the shell company documents. They've launched an investigation into money laundering." That Phil's tan face had gone gray. "You can't do that. That money is legally ours. That money is stolen. Embezzled from Sullivan Construction over 19 years. The IRS Criminal Investigation Division has opened a case. Detective Morrison is in the next room right now recording this entire conversation." Ryan lunged toward the study door, but 2 federal agents stepped out, blocking his path. "Ryan Sullivan," Agent Chin said, pulling out her badge. "We need you to stay right where you are. Why, brother turned back to me, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Pure, undiluted rage. "You were always Dad's favorite," he spat. "Always the smart one, the talented one, the one who could do no wrong. Did you know that? Every time I landed a big contract, he'd find a way to credit your financial planning. Every time I managed a successful project, he'd say it was because of your budgeting. Ryan, you were driving the car when Mom died." His voice cracked. "You were 17, just got your license, and you insisted you were ready to drive her to her chemo appointment. You hit that pothole, the car swerved, and Mom hit her head on the window so hard she got a concussion. 2 weeks later, she was dead. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. The concussion didn't kill her," I said quietly. "The cancer did. The concussion weakened her, made her too sick for the final round of treatment. The doctors said so. But Dad never blamed you, did he? Never even mentioned it. He just let you go on thinking you were perfect, while I watched him protect you from the truth. I asked that what this was about." My voice shook. "Revenge because you blame me for Mom's death?" "This was about fairness." Ryan shouted. "Dad owed me something after years of putting you first. The offshore accounts were my compensation for being the second-choice child. Phil put a hand on Ryan's shoulder. We should stop talking. Lawyer up, but Ryan shook him off. 20 years, Nick. 20 years I worked alongside you, pretending we were partners, while Dad reminded me every single day that you were the brilliant one. So yeah, when he started moving money offshore, when he asked me to help, I said yes. Because finally, I was the one he trusted with something important. He didn't trust you, I said. He used you, the same way he used me. Least he left me something. What did you get? A failing business and a guilty conscience. I got the truth, I said, and the chance to make it right. Agent Chen stepped forward. Ryan Sullivan, Philip Mitchell, you're both under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, and embezzlement at AS. They read them their rights. Ryan looked at me one last time. I hope you're happy, Nick. You destroyed your own family. You did that the moment you chose fraud over honesty. They were let out in handcuffs. Phil went quietly, but Ryan fought every step, shouting accusations about favoritism and betrayal that echoed through the house, even after the front door closed. I stood alone in Dad's living room, shaking, as Detective Morrison emerged from the study. You did good, she said gently. I know that wasn't easy, it wasn't. But it was necessary. The federal investigation moved faster than anyone expected. Within 48 hours of Ryan and Phil's arrest, Agent Chen's team had executed search warrants on 3 continents, frozen 17 different accounts, and built a case that would have made any prosecutor smile. I spent those 48 hours in a conference room at the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, walking them through every transaction, every journal entry, every piece of evidence Dad had left behind. They asked the same questions in different ways, testing my story for inconsistencies that didn't exist. On the 3rd day, Agent Chen brought me coffee and sat across from me with a thick folder. We've reconstructed the timeline, she said. Your father started moving money in January 2006. The first transfer was $15,000 to a Cayman account, flagged as payment for international consulting services. Mom died in March 2005, I said. 10 months earlier, we pulled her medical records. The experimental treatment she received in her final year cost $340,000. Your father's insurance denied coverage, calling them medically unnecessary. He paid out of pocket, liquidating retirement accounts, taking loans against the business. By the time she died, he was $280,000 in debt that I'd known about the medical bills. I'd watched Dad struggle to pay them, watched him age 10 years in those 18 months. But I'd never known the full scope of how much he'd sacrificed. The embezzlement started as survival, Agent Chin continued. He was drowning financially, creditors were circling, and he had 2 teenage kids to support. The first year, he only moved enough to cover the debt payments and keep the business afloat. When did it change? 2008. The recession hit, and your father should have gone bankrupt. But according to his journals, he'd moved enough money offshore by then to inject capital back into the company through fake contracts. He saved Sullivan Construction by laundering his own stolen money. The irony was crushing. The recession survival story I'd thought was my triumph had actually been Dad's fraud covering for Dad's fraud. By 2010, he'd moved $430,000 offshore. That's when Philip Sullivan approached him with a proposal. Philip was your father's childhood friend, not actually related. He'd been calling himself Uncle Phil since you and Ryan were kids, and everyone just assumed he was family. He wasn't my uncle at all, no blood relation. He was drowning in gambling debts and child support payments from 2 ex-wives, facing criminal charges for fraud in Nevada. Your father offered him an out, fake his death, disappear to the Caymans, manage the offshore accounts in exchange for a cut of the profits. I thought about all those childhood memories of Uncle Phil at Christmas, at birthdays, at family barbecues. All of it had been a performance by a con artist who saw my father's desperation as an opportunity. The car accident in 2010 was elaborately staged, Agent Chin said. They paid a morgue attendant in Las Vegas $50,000 for an unclaimed body matching Philip's description. burned it beyond recognition in a staged crash. The dental records were falsified. Everyone believed he was dead, including you. And Ryan? Her expression darkened. Your brother knew about the offshore accounts by 2007, but he didn't know about Philip faking his death until 2012. According to Philip's statement, he's cooperating in exchange for a reduced sentence. Ryan discovered the truth accidentally when he saw a credit card charge from Grand Cayman on your father's account. Dad brought him in after that? Slowly. First just as a lookout, someone to cover if you got suspicious. But by 2015, Ryan was fully complicit. He helped establish the shell companies, opened the international properties, traveled to the Caymans quarterly to meet with Philip. According to Philip, Ryan grew to love it. The deception became a game for him. A game. My brother had treated my trust like entertainment. The really disturbing part, Agent Chin continued, is what we found in Ryan's personal files. He kept a journal too. Want to read it? I didn't, but I needed to. The journal was digital, encrypted, found on a laptop Ryan had hidden in a storage unit. Agent Chin pulled up entries dated across the last decade. Dad asked me to review offshore transfers today. Nicole's in the next room crunching numbers for the Mesa project, completely oblivious. She thinks she's so smart, but she can't see what's happening right under her nose. It's almost funny. Visited Uncle Phil in Cayman. The villa is incredible. While Nicole slaves away in Phoenix, we're building an empire she'll never touch. Dad says it's not about hurting her, but I'm not sure I believe that anymore. I think part of him enjoys knowing he's fooling his genius daughter. Nicole saved the company again today. New contract, better margins, all her brilliant financial planning. Dad praised her for an hour. Meanwhile, the real money is in accounts she doesn't know exist, managed by people she thinks are dead. Sometimes I wonder if she deserves to know. Then I remember she was driving when Mom died, and I stop wondering Dad's getting sentimental. Keeps talking about telling Nicole the truth, bringing her in, making it right. I told him absolutely not. She'd turn us all in without hesitation. Her moral superiority has always been her fatal flaw. Better to let her think she's the hero while we secure the real future. I closed the laptop, my hands trembling. Ryan blamed you for your mother's death, Agent Chin said gently. The journals make that clear. He convinced himself that the embezzlement was justified restitution for being the less favored child. The car accident wasn't my fault. The concussion didn't kill her, we know. The medical records confirm the cancer was too advanced by that point. But Ryan needed someone to blame, and apparently your father's favoritism toward you made you an easy target. The dream team had never existed. It had always been me working legitimately while Ryan and Dad built their criminal enterprise. Using my success as cover for their fraud point 3 weeks later, the charges were filed. Ryan and Philip were each facing 15 counts of wire fraud, 12 counts of money laundering, and conspiracy to defraud the United States. The federal prosecutor estimated they'd each receive 15 to 20 years if convicted. Mitchell called me with updates on the civil side. Sullivan Construction's reputation is surprisingly intact. Our clients understand you weren't involved, weren't even aware of the fraud. Several have already reached out about continuing their contracts with you. The company is mine entirely. The offshore assets are being seized by the government, but Sullivan Construction itself is legitimate. You built that business honestly. Every contract you managed, every financial decision you made, it was all clean. Your father and brother operated a parallel criminal enterprise, but they kept it completely separate from your work. IT should have felt like vindication. Instead, it felt hollow. I spent the next month going through Dad's journals again, reading every entry from 2006 forward, trying to understand how desperation had turned into greed, how Father's love had twisted into betrayal. The early entries were heartbreaking. Dad writing about lying awake at night terrified of losing the business, of failing Ryan, and me the way he felt he'd failed Mom by not being able to afford better treatment. He'd started embezzling not for luxury, but for survival, to keep food on the table and the lights on while paying down crushing medical debt. But somewhere around 2010, the tone changed. He started writing about the thrill of outsmarting the IRS, the satisfaction of building something they couldn't touch, the power of controlling secrets. The man who'd started stealing out of desperation had become someone who enjoyed being a criminal, and Ryan had followed that same path. Started as a reluctant accomplice, became an enthusiastic participant. I understood Dad's initial desperation. I even felt sympathy for the impossible position he'd been in, drowning in debt while trying to raise 2 teenagers alone. But understanding didn't equal forgiveness. He'd had choices. He could have filed bankruptcy, could have been honest with Ryan and me about the financial situation, could have asked for help instead of building a criminal empire. Family betrayal hits different when you realize the warning signs were always there. Dad's secretive phone calls, his vague explanations about complicated investments, the way he'd shut down whenever I asked too many questions about certain accounts. Ryan's mysterious absences, his defensive reactions when I questioned his travel, the way he'd changed the subject whenever offshore banking came up in conversation. The signs had been there for years. I'd just been too trusting to see them, that if you've ever missed the red flags because you trusted someone completely, if you've ever realized too late that loyalty was never mutual, drop a comment below. Because what I learned in those awful weeks after the arrests was this. Sometimes the people who betray you most deeply are the ones you never thought to question. And sometimes the hardest truth to accept is that the family you thought you had never really existed at all, that I mourned my brother. Not the criminal sitting in federal custody awaiting trial, but the person I believed he was. The partner who'd worked alongside me for 20 years. The protector who'd helped me through Mom's death. The friend who'd been there for every milestone. That person had never existed. He'd been a fiction Ryan had maintained while resenting me for perceived favoritism, while blaming me for Mom's death, while stealing from the company we were supposedly building together. The dream team had always been one-sided. I'd been working toward a shared future while Ryan had been planning his exit strategy. 3 months after Dad's death, I sat in his study one final time before putting the house on the market. I'd removed Mom's portrait from the wall, planning to hang it in my condo. Behind it, the safe sat empty now, all its secrets exposed to federal authorities. I thought about Dad's last video confession, his plea for forgiveness, his claim that everything had been motivated by love and fear. Maybe that was true at the beginning, but by the end he'd been motivated by something else entirely. Control, power, the satisfaction of fooling everyone, especially his genius daughter who couldn't see the truth right in front of her face. I'd spent my whole life trying to honor his legacy. Now I had to build a new one, untainted by his crimes, based on the legitimate success I'd achieved despite his betrayal rather than because of his support. The company was mine. The reputation was salvageable. The future was unwritten, and for the first time in my life I was completely, terrifyingly free. 6 months after the arrests, I stood in the federal courthouse in Phoenix, listening to the judge deliver sentences that would reshape what was left of my family. Ryan Sullivan, you are hereby sentenced to 12 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years supervised release. You will also pay restitution in the amount of $840,000 to Sullivan Construction. Ryan stood at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, thinner than I'd ever seen him, his shoulders slumped in defeat. He didn't look at me when the marshals led him away. Philip Mitchell, you are hereby sentenced to 15 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years supervised release. You will pay restitution and are permanently barred from engaging in financial services. Uncle Phil, or whatever his real name was, went quietly. The con artist who'd fooled our entire family for decades finally ran out of tricks. I left the courthouse and drove directly to the office. Not Dad's office in Scottsdale, but the new headquarters I'd leased in downtown Phoenix. The building was modern glass and steel, nothing like the old Sullivan Construction warehouse. The sign out front read Sullivan and Associates in clean, professional letters. Associates, not and son or family business. Associates, because I'd rebuilt this company on merit and competence, not blood relations that meant nothing. Inside, 50 employees were hard at work on projects we'd won legitimately. No shell companies, no offshore accounts, no fake invoices. Just honest construction work, fair contracts, and a reputation. I was building one project at a time. My assistant, Jordan, met me at the door. How did it go? 12 years for Ryan. 15 for Phil. She nodded, her expression sympathetic but not pitying. Good. They earned it. Your 2 p.m. is here, by the way. The foundation lawyer. The foundation. That had been Mitchell's idea, actually. The government seized $840,000 in recovered funds, he'd explained 3 months ago. After restitution to Sullivan Construction and legal fees, there's about $200,000 left. You could claim it, or you could do something meaningful with it. I'd done something meaningful. The Catherine Sullivan Foundation launched last month, dedicated to helping families facing medical bankruptcy from cancer treatment. We paid for experimental therapies insurance companies denied. We covered travel costs for specialized care. We prevented other fathers from making the desperate choices mine had made. IT wouldn't bring Mom back. It wouldn't erase Dad's crimes. But it was a legacy worth building, one that honored her memory without perpetuating his mistakes. The meeting with the foundation lawyer took an hour. By the time she left, we'd established grants for 3 families in Arizona whose insurance had denied coverage for innovative treatments. One of them was a single mother with 2 teenage kids, watching her savings evaporate while fighting ovarian cancer. Di knew that story. I'd lived it from the other side. After work, I drove to my therapist's office. Dr. Patricia Warren had been seeing me twice a week since the arrests, helping me process betrayal that went deeper than fraud. She specialized in family trauma, and God knew I had enough of that to fill her schedule. How are you feeling about the sentencing? She asked as I settled into the familiar chair in her office, relieved, angry, sad. All of it at once, that's normal. You're mourning multiple losses, simultaneously your brother, your father, your sense of family identity. I keep thinking about the good memories, I admitted. Sunday dinners, working on projects together, the way Ryan used to make me laugh when I was stressed. Were any of those moments real? They were real to you, Dr. Warren said gently. The person you thought Ryan was, the relationship you believed you had, those were real in your experience. The fact that he was performing doesn't retroactively erase your genuine feelings, but it makes them meaningless. No, it makes them complicated. She leaned forward slightly. Nicole, you loved your brother. That love was real, even if he didn't deserve it. You can mourn the relationship you thought you had while also holding him accountable for who he actually was. Can I, though? Because right now it feels like I should have known. The signs were there that you trusted someone you'd known your entire life. That's not a character flaw. That's being human. That we talked for another 40 minutes about trust, about the difference between naivete and faith, about how loving someone doesn't mean you truly know them. By the time I left her office, I felt marginally more stable, though stability was relative these days. That night, alone in my condo, I found a letter waiting in my mailbox. The return address was a federal correctional facility in Texas. Ryan's handwriting on the envelope, that I almost threw it away unopened. Almost convinced myself I didn't need to hear whatever justifications or accusations he'd written. But curiosity won out over self-protection. Did I open the letter? Nicole, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even deserve a response. But I need to say things I should have said 20 years ago. And prison gives you a lot of time to think about your failures. I was jealous of you from the time we were kids. You were smarter, more talented, more everything. Mom used to brag about your grades to her friends. Dad would tell his crew that you were going to run a Fortune 500 company someday. And me? I was the worker, the muscle, the one who was good with his hands, but not his head. After Mom died, that jealousy turned into something worse. I blamed you for the accident, even though I knew logically it wasn't your fault. But I needed someone to blame, and you were there, and Dad never once held you accountable for anything. He protected you from every consequence, while I had to figure out my own problems. When Dad started moving money offshore, when he brought me in on the secret, it felt like finally, I was the special one, the trusted one, the one with value beyond just manual labor. I loved that feeling, loved having knowledge you didn't have, loved being part of something that proved I wasn't just your sidekick. The fraud became addictive. Every time we got away with another transfer, every time you reviewed the books and didn't catch the discrepancies, it felt like winning. Like I was finally smarter than the genius sister everyone worshipped, that I knew it was wrong. I knew it would hurt you eventually, but I convinced myself you'd be fine, that you were too talented to be dragged down by our crimes, that your ignorance protected you, that I was lying to myself. The truth is, I wanted to hurt you, wanted you to lose something for once, wanted you to feel what it was like to be second best, second choice, second priority. I'm sorry. Those words mean nothing after what I did, but I'm saying them anyway. You deserved a real brother, a real partner, someone who celebrated your success instead of resenting it. I wasn't that person. I don't know if I ever was. Dad used to say you were too rigid, too honest, too committed to doing things the right way. He meant it as a criticism, but he was wrong. Your integrity is your greatest strength. It's what saved you when everything fell apart. It's what will carry you forward while I rot in here, that I hope you build something amazing, Nick. Something that makes our family name mean something good again. You're the only one of us who ever could. Ryan and I read the letter 3 times, looking for manipulation or self-pity, finding mostly just honesty. Raw, painful, 20 years too late honesty. IT didn't change anything. Didn't make me forgive him. Didn't erase the betrayal or the years of lies. But it gave me something I needed. Confirmation that the jealousy had been real, that the favoritism I'd never noticed had shaped everything, that our partnership had always been an illusion. I filed the letter away and didn't respond. Some apologies don't deserve acknowledgement. At a year after Dad's death, Sullivan Associates secured a contract worth $4.5 million, the largest in company history. I celebrated with my team, people I'd hired based on skill and character, people who earned their positions through merit, people who'd never once made me question their loyalty. Jordan brought champagne to the office, to the boss who built this from scratch. Not from scratch, I corrected, raising my glass. From the ashes of something corrupt. There's a difference, but they toasted me anyway, and I let myself feel proud for the first time in months. Later that night, alone in my office, I looked at the photos on my desk. Mom's portrait sat front and center, the same image from Dad's painting, but in a simple frame I'd chosen myself. Her smile reminded me what real love looked like, uncomplicated by crime or betrayal. That Dad's photo was in a box in my storage unit. I couldn't throw it away. He was still my father, still part of my history, but I couldn't look at it every day either. Some relationships exist in complicated spaces between love and rejection, honor and accountability. That Ryan's photo didn't exist anywhere. Some betrayals are simply unforgivable. I tested my brother's loyalty and discovered I never knew him at all. But in losing my family, I found myself. Found strength I didn't know I had. Found integrity that survived even when everyone around me had abandoned theirs. Found the ability to build something real from the ruins of something false. The hardest truth I learned was that blood doesn't guarantee loyalty, that family can be the people who hurt you most deeply, and that sometimes the most powerful choice you can make is to walk away. But I also learned that you can survive betrayal, that you can rebuild after devastation, that you can carry someone's legacy without carrying their crimes. Sullivan and Associates isn't the company Dad built. It's better, cleaner, honest, and entirely mine. That's the revenge I chose. Not destruction, but creation. Not bitterness, but success. Not family loyalty at any cost, but self-respect that can't be compromised. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what's right? Have you ever discovered that the people you trusted most were the ones lying to you all along? Comment boundaries if you believe some betrayals can't be forgiven, that walking away is sometimes the only healthy choice. Share this story with someone who needs to hear that blood doesn't obligate you to accept abuse, that family should earn your trust rather than demand it, that building your own life matters more than preserving toxic relationships. Subscribe to Revenge with Alice for more stories about justice, betrayal, and the power of choosing yourself over people who never chose you. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's building something so legitimate, so successful, so honest that their corruption can't touch it. And my name is Nicole Sullivan, and I rebuilt my life from the ashes of my family's crimes. If I can do it, so can you.